A single gold hoop sits in a dead man's ear. He is face down in the sand, half buried by tide, and the men standing over him do not touch his boots. They do not touch his coat. They reach for the ear. This was not robbery. This was procedure. For centuries, sailors believed that gold, worn close to the skin, could buy a man something no coin in his pocket ever could: a burial. Most people think pirates wore earrings for style. A flash of gold against sun-cracked skin, a costume detail, something for the portrait. That's not what happened. The ocean, before the 18th century, was not a place men explored. It was a place men disappeared into. No maps that meant anything. No rescue. No coordinates. A sailor did not fear the sea the way a modern person fears a storm on the news. He feared it the way a small animal fears an owl overhead. A threat too large to reason with, only to survive. And in that world, a body without a name was not a tragedy. It was a Tuesday. So sailors did something quietly desperate. They turned their bodies into insurance policies. In the 1700s, a sailor's gold earring was rarely decoration. It was payment, worn in advance, for a funeral he might never live to request. If a ship sank and a body washed ashore in some foreign port, a stranger who found it faced a choice: leave it to rot, or bury it properly. Gold changed that calculation. A single earring, pried loose, could cover a coffin and a plot. The dead man paid his own way into the ground. Think about what that means. These were men who woke every morning already negotiating with their own corpse. That is not romantic. That is a species learning to plan for its own erasure. Calmly, practically, as if death were simply the next port of call. But the earring did more than pay for a grave. It was also believed to prevent one. Sailors in the Age of Sail lived inside a strange, half-scientific, half-superstitious universe. Long before germ theory, before anesthesia, before anyone understood how the inner ear regulated balance, men noticed something. Sailors who had survived falls from the rigging, brutal drops onto hard decks, blows to the head that should have killed them, sometimes wore an earring afterward. The logic that emerged wasn't medicine. It was pattern matching under fear. Piercing the earlobe, some believed, improved eyesight. Others believed it prevented seasickness, or protected against drowning, as though a small wound deliberately given to the body could somehow inoculate it against a much larger one. Modern researchers studying folk medicine have noted something uncomfortable about this kind of belief. It wasn't stupidity. It was the human brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Searching desperately for control in an environment that offered none. A sailor could not control the wind. He could not control the reef beneath the waterline or the fever that took his bunkmate in the night. But he could control this. A needle, a ring of gold, a ritual small enough to actually finish. There is a pattern here, and it goes back much further than pirates. Long before ships, humans were already doing this, piercing the body, marking it, cutting into it deliberately, not for beauty first, but for protection. Amulets against evil, scars to ward off spirits, small deliberate wounds meant to prevent larger invisible ones. Anthropologists have found pierced ears and modified bodies in burial sites going back thousands of years, long before anyone was sailing anywhere. The ocean didn't invent this instinct. The ocean just gave it a new emergency to respond to. Which raises an uncomfortable question. How much of human ritual, across all of history, is really just fear wearing the costume of tradition? There was also a colder, more practical use for that gold, one with nothing to do with superstition at all. A sailor's earring was liquid currency, hidden in plain sight, immune to shipwreck. Coins could be stolen from a chest. Coins could sink with a ship. But gold worn on the body traveled with the body, through storms, through mutinies, through the chaos of boarding an enemy vessel where every other possession might be seized in seconds. In a profession with no bank, no insurance, no guarantee of a next paycheck, the earring was a portable emergency fund, small enough to hide, valuable enough to matter, and personal enough that no captain could officially claim it as ship's property. This is worth sitting with for a moment. These men had built, out of nothing but a piece of jewelry, a financial system, a medical superstition, and a funeral plan, all fused into a single object hanging from one ear. That is not decoration. That is architecture. A tiny piece of civilization engineered under unbearable uncertainty. There's also a quieter reason, one that has less to do with the sea and more to do with the men themselves. Piercing an ear hurt. It scarred. And in a culture obsessed with toughness, that scar became a kind of currency too. Not gold, but proof. Proof that you had crossed the equator, or rounded a particular treacherous cape, or survived a passage that killed other men. Some sailing traditions marked exactly this. An earring earned, not simply worn, after a specific dangerous voyage was completed alive. The pain was the point. It was a rite of passage in the oldest sense. A wound chosen freely, worn permanently, as evidence that you had already endured something the sea had failed to kill you with. In this light, the earring stops being superstition or currency. It becomes language. A silent way of saying, to every other sailor who understood the code, I have already survived what you fear. And here is where the story quietly widens. Past pirates, past sailors, past the ocean entirely. Because this is not really a story about earrings. It's a story about what human beings do when they are handed a universe that does not care whether they live or die. They ritualize it. They small-scale it. They take an unbearable, formless fear. The fear of dying anonymously, of vanishing without a name, of a body no one will bother to bury. And they compress that fear into something they can hold in 2 fingers and push through skin. A pirate did not fear death the way we imagine pirates fearing anything. Loudly, dramatically, with a sword raised. He feared it quietly, administratively, the way a person today fears a hospital bill or an unmarked grave. And so he did what humans have always done with fears too large to face directly. He made it small, he made it wearable, he made it gold. Modern sailors, centuries later, still sometimes pierce an ear after crossing a significant line at sea. An echo of a ritual whose original, desperate logic has mostly been forgotten, even as the gesture survives. Which means somewhere on a ship right now, in the year this is being watched, someone may be wearing a small piece of gold in their ear without knowing they are quietly repeating an act first performed by men who expected, reasonably, to die unnamed at sea. The earring outlived the fear that created it. And maybe that's the real discovery here. Not about pirates, not about superstition, but about us. How much of what we wear, what we ritualize, what we still quietly believe protects us, was never really about logic at all. It was about a species standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable, doing the only thing it has ever known how to do, making the unbearable small enough to carry.